my desktop. I presume everybody can see the psychedelic mountains. All right, so let's get going here. So before we dive into the primary topic today, I think Dave, you had some shout outs to folks, volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's linked to in the wiki. I guess we're not displaying it, which is fine, but if you want to take a look for more details, it's there. But we've had two contributors show up recently, some individual volunteers who want to do documentation work.
Sweet.
And that's something that we've been really wanting to encourage more of, so I thought it was definitely worth giving them a shout out. But their names are Elena and Emerson, and one of the first things they want to work on is a document called An Introduction to SDN and ONOS for Total Newbies, which they ran the idea by us, and Ayako was saying that's definitely something we could make use of, and so they have a draft of it going right now, and we'll share it around when it's ready. But definitely shout out to them.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's good to have
So what is their background?
They have a Windows administration background, and they said that they seem like they're coming at it from a totally different angle from like what it seems like we all have here, and so they said it would be useful to just kind of take a step back and talk about their experience, kind of trying to come up to speed with ONOS, and it seemed like it would be generally useful.
Okay. Great, thanks. Okay, so on the primary topic for today, the idea is to talk about some how to tackle the native modules in ONOS. Now, we actually came across this on a number of different occasions in the past, but most recently, there's actually a review right now that Jen put in place for obtaining some system metric information in order to ascertain finely grained load on a system to help us do better job at load balancing, which is really useful, but it presents a number of problems. So as everybody knows today, ONOS is a Java-based platform, and therefore it's portable, it's platform independent. However, you can see from first-hand experience that some information is not directly accessible from the JVM, and it's either due to a lack of having the necessary things abstracted and accessible at runtime, because they're not perhaps universally available on majority of the platforms, or sometimes it's due to performance, or sometimes it's both. You know, sometimes you can do the things, but because you don't have access to the specialized hardware, you may need to do it natively.
So I'm kind of unclear on what the problem is. Like I see the word problem at the top of this page, but I don't know which of those is a problem.
Okay. So, okay.
I mean, I guess you're saying like number three is the problem, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so
which is
so the problem
has
is
this functionality
okay.
that's probably not good,
okay,
right?
So, you know what I mean. Okay, it's portable, platform independent, but not everything is accessible. That's one problem. Second one is a problem. The third one, it's there's current mechanisms to allow you to solve the problems, but they create problems of their own. That's the issue, right? Because we can use JNI and we can use JNA. JNA is actually a little bit safer, trades off, but also a trade of performance. It's not as fast. So it may solve the JNI versus JNA, give you certain trade-offs. But the question is, they present a number of issues. They have an impact on security. They have an impact on resiliency. For example, a single segmentation violation is going to take down the entire JVM. That's a problem, right? They have also severe impact on platform independence, and also impact on maintenance liability, in a sense that you have to now worry about distributing and maintaining sort of platform-specific libraries.
Okay, complexity thing also.
Oh, sure.
Which maybe you can build to maintenance liability, but it's you're adding complexity to the system, which imposes a tax on the entire system. Maybe that's sort of maintenance liability.
That's what I was implying here. So the couple of different fundamental questions, right, that we have to ask ourselves: do we even allow this? And if so, do we allow it in a sort of open field, then everybody do whatever you want and have a nice day, or do we do we even promote it in a sense that we allow it, and here's a mechanism that you use to deliver your JNI platform libraries. I'll say probably not that one for sure.
Not that one.
Meaning, like, we're not going to go out of our way to help you deliver.
I mean,
third-party library.
that's the interesting thing is, what do you mean by number one? I mean, is it even possible to disallow it? Like, can you refuse? Could ONOS like refuse to load an app that has JNA as its dependency or something like that? Is that what you're sort of thinking?
No.
Okay, the question of what should be part of the official distribution.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, is it saying, is this a political question or a technical question, I guess, or is it both, actually?
No, it's really, I think it's really a technical question.
Since it's what's part of the
Yes.
official release.
Yes.
Like,
But there's this other thing, like you
if
could
someone-
like identify, you could like forbid apps from using it and refuse to load them, right?
If someone were to download ONOS and do it,
Then we
and
can't
slap
stop
in
it.
JNI,
Absolutely.
whatever.
We can't stop it.
No.
No, do
We
we?
could provide
No.
mechanisms to prevent applications from using it.
Yeah, well, I don't think we should. So
No,
first of all,
that's
yeah.
weird.
So I would avoid the extra. Okay, so I'm here posing these questions. So let's go through these questions
Okay.
at least, right? And then we can figure out, have an open discussion
Okay.
that addresses some of these things. So do we allow this and then or promote it? Let's say we don't, or what if a third-party library has such dependency, which is the case that we came across this one. We actually are directly using just Java, but that Java, in order to accomplish its goals, needs to have these platform-specific libraries available. How do they get delivered? Do they get prepackaged? Or do they get selectively downloaded? Where from? I think we all agree, for example, that they should be checked into Git, just as an example, right? How to gracefully handle the case where this specific platform that they're running it on does not have the corresponding libraries. What are the possible alternatives? Like, for example, what about running things out of process to avoid some of these problems? Now, so there's multiple different approaches that we can consider. And I think at this point in time, we can probably open it up for discussion to figure out what the pros and cons are.
So,
right?
as a piece of information, the OSGI spec does define an OSGI command or wrapper for JNI, where you can specify what you need, what platform you need, what things you basically need, and as long as these things aren't satisfied, that module does not doesn't get loaded.
Okay.
So that's already a way of like, now whether that's supporting Karaf or not, I don't know. Right? Because it's OSGI spec, not everybody supports everything.
Yeah.
Like everything.
I don't think we can.
But the cool, I mean, I guess that's one precondition, if it's possible. If it's possible, and the second one could be, if you deliver your native module as a bundle that's loadable and dynamically loadable and not doesn't have to be there all the time, then you have a higher chance of being accepted, like everything, right? Because if now ONOS builds a dependency on some JNI library, then we're not okay, right? That's bad. But if it's something that like you're using because you need it for some random for some feature, then it's okay, right? Whatever. What's wrong? There's nothing wrong with that.
So what if we were
Well,
to? So
there might be if you care about isolation, which is that if you want to trust your apps that they won't, do something horrible to your underlying system, you might want to restrict what apps can do. You might want to say, for example,
That's security. That's
well,
in the realm of
security is important. What I'm saying is that in security, you might want to say, as an administrator, don't load any apps which have native components. You might want to say that, for example.
I mean,
So
saying
for
that
this, let me just say that if you were to narrowing the discussion temporarily to narrow discussion, let's say we consider a fairly narrow case where let's say we are using third-party library that currently has a dependency on such libraries, and it's for a built-in application.
Yeah, I'd say.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what do we? How should we approach this? So currently,
It's for a built-in application.
so for a built-in
So
application.
that means that it would always be loaded.
Well, so it's for a built-in application that's pre-installed, but not necessarily always loaded. It's an application, which means it doesn't have to be loaded. Right? But it's something that we ship, and we need to deliver now.
But
And so-
maybe here's the thing, right? Like, I mean, I might be wrong, right? But I'm thinking that if you require a native library, it's because you need. Well, maybe you're doing it for performance reasons. even then, I'm just thinking like you're usually tying yourself closer to the platform on which you're deploying.
Sure.
Which means that like usually it's a question of like interoperating with either the local networking stack or the making system calls to the machine, which in a way, and that might be a bit extreme, an application on top of ONOS shouldn't be dealing with directly.
Right.
So
I agree. I agree completely.
So if you have a dependency going from application straight down to that level, something's weird already.
Yes. So in this case, we're going through a third-party library. So let's say third-party library.
But then that third-party library cannot be important to your apps.
Let's take the example of the monitoring app that Jian is working on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, basically all that is doing is measuring, system utilization stats.
Sure.
CPU,
Right, CPU, things like
disk
that.
stats.
Yeah,
Right.
so it kind of bugs me that
But there's ways of getting that information without going through J&I. or-
precisely. So that,
So that
yeah.
is the question, right? So whenever I think these kind of dependencies, introducing these kind of dependencies should be well thought out. I mean, we should
Absolutely. Yeah.
make an argument. I mean, if there is an alternative which gets you the same thing, I think we should always look for like portable ways of doing it rather than like.
But it may not be 100% portable, right? Because
Just
the
because you're
reading
using
file
system
system
isn't necessarily
is going to be portable on.
It's platform. I mean, there's sort of multiple things. There's portability issues, and there's also, but the nice thing about, for example, there are platform dependencies which you can still introduce just using Java APIs, and we should be cognizant of those. And those certainly impose a cost in portability, a cost in complexity, a cost in maintenance. And there are also complexity caused by native code, which I think is worse, because it's no longer Java. It's now breaks across releases of operating systems.
Well, yeah,
It's not even compatible across the same kernel.
Still liability somewhere else, right? It's easy for the developer because this API just calls.
It's easy for any
But
developer.
it makes it much harder for the deployer and for the sort of the maintenance of the releasable artifact, distributable artifact, because now it's tainted with the platform.
Yeah, it can. There's this other pain that
it's a trade-off.
Yeah, well, it's kind of worse. It's kind of one of these really annoying things that either it pushes pain off to the users deploying it, or it pushes an extreme amount of pain onto the development team that now has to absorb this pain. So it's really nasty. I think you really want to avoid it. Whereas platform-dependent code that's in Java, a lot easier to maintain. And the beautiful thing about platform-dependent code in Java is that it's probably going to be more resilient, more portable across operating system releases. An example being reading the CPU Act subsystem on Linux. Works on any Linux kernel. So that means it works on any version of Ubuntu. And so, and it works on, and it also works on Slackware and SUSE and Fedora and all these other other distros, which is really nice. Whereas if you made a binary library, it wouldn't be compatible across the next release of the same OS. So there's,
So for example, in this specific case, where we have a need to be able to obtain some variables about the system performance, right? The one alternative would be to basically retrieve this information through using Java, but using the file system.
Yeah, file system API.
But and then absorb any platform specifics within Java.
That seems
that's
kind of a dubious idea, but certainly better than the alternative.
Right.
Also,
then the question is, how do you do this on Windows, or how do you do this on?
Right. No, exactly. So that was exactly the next question I asked. So then, what we basically do with that is then we basically just, and I'm perfectly fine for just saying, for Windows, there's this capability doesn't exist.
Or
write it Java.
I'm fine with building the API and the abstraction in Java and making it work on Linux. Because frankly, ONOS you can only deploy on Ubuntu 14 anyway, in its current version. So, make it work on Linux. And then if somebody wants to make a Windows version,
put it that way. I would say Windows is not supported.
Okay. So the thing
There's
is,
other parts that we use,
so
like file paths.
then if people want to do a Mac version, they can do a Mac version, right?
There's a whole bunch of stuff. Like seriously, you're gonna deploy, you're gonna run ONOS on Windows? Like, why? Why would you ever do this to yourself?
Well, ONOS on Windows with Cygwin, you might be Microsoft, for example.
Microsoft runs
They run Linux in Azure, I know, but
Yeah, exactly.
even so, even so, you might have some desire to run Windows, and you
kind of desire.
Well, okay. So the thing is, okay. So again, I think this is
It
where
might save you
specifics make it
resources.
much simpler because you know the specific use case. So in this particular case, we're talking about a feature that really applies only to clustered environments, right? So you're clearly not going to run the clustered environments on Macs. I think it could be what?
Well, I think it's one of those interesting
and if you
things.
are, then if you were to provide an abstraction, so if you provide
Yeah,
a
yeah,
mechanism
I think
to obtain that instrumentation in whatever way, even using platform-specific libraries, great.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's not the primary choice, I guess.
I'm really kind of into that actually. That do it in Java, make it work for Linux.
So
build
in
the
this
abstraction.
case, so in this specific case, that means that there would be a couple of cons that would not be. Pros would be that it would be Java only, and would run on basically pretty much all of the Unix kernels.
And no installation changes, no binary blobs, etc. Lots of really good things.
Yeah. So caveat here is that it wouldn't necessarily run out of the box on Windows or
Mac
OS
OS.
X systems, but given the fact that this is for selectable functionality anyway, and it's for high-end server balancing, likelihood is that this feature would be needed on this platform is very, very low. And even if it is needed, then it can be delivered using the same mechanism. It's just write a different driver for it, essentially, for that functionality, or need different implementation for it, and we're good to go, right? So in this case, and the con here is also that means that the development that we now sort of from development aspects, it's right now really easy to obtain these numbers, and we have essentially the code already. The downside is that we would have to essentially re-implement getting this information ourselves. Now we may not need the full breadth of that information that these libraries provide us, but we do need some stuff. So currently what we're getting is the memory, right? The CPU utilization, and are we getting also the disk and network, or?
So the problem is, for example, like available memory size is not correct if we just rely on.
I'm not suggesting to rely on just using Java. Here,
using Java is not a bad idea either.
No. Well, using the system environment that Java provides, they don't offer you sufficient resolution into the state of the memory within the VM and outside of it. It's erroneous because it doesn't account for free space outside of the garbage collector and all of that stuff. So there's limitations. So we should be actually going to the operating system to ask that.
Here's a question: should really ONOS be other than very like shouldn't be reporting on CPU states like information about the CPU should be reporting on information about the memory other than its own heap space? Should be reporting like those things seem like if you want to tell if you want to have alarms based on like, oh, this cluster node is consuming is pegged at 100% and it's not running anymore, that should be done by something like Nagios or Cacti or some other mechanism that's more designed for that purpose out of ONOS.
The idea is that we're consuming that information internally to be able to shift load.
I understand, but you can get that information from somewhere else, right? Like ONOS could be checking whatever Nagios is exposing, right?
Yeah, that's the service API one. The lot sort of at the bottom. Like, what about out of process invocation? What if we just say, look, ONOS can use a service API provided by system X. Right. I see nothing wrong with that. I think that's a perfectly good solution.
I don't think we should engage in the world of what's it called, like monitoring the CPU, the environment we're to some extent the environment we're in, but not too much. I mean, it's not the goal of ONOS.
Basically, you're saying that there is something running on the same box as ONOS that is publishing
that information.
An agent that is publishing stats to some place where it gets aggregated.
We're a network operating system. We're not an operating system.
Yeah. Well, the interesting question, right, is that how much do you want to sort of grow ONOS in that direction? So if David Mainbridge were here, he'd be like, this is feature bloat. They're already existing systems, the SNMPs and Nagios, et cetera, of this world that are built to do this. Just use them and use their API, and if you want to use it, just say that you'll need to install it in your operating system the way you do it normally.
That's fine. Actually, it could be a dependency of ONOS and deployment, right?
It could be a package dependency like a deb or RPM.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with these things.
So there could be, I mean, there are obviously system level metrics which are accessible, better access outside of ONOS environment. But there could also be like ONOS specific stats and metrics that are generated within ONOS.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And that's fine.
I mean, and those can be published as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And could be published to the same mechanism. Could be published to Nagios as well.
Sure.
Right. So you have a central point published over a Kafka bus or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. But I mean, I just don't see the reason of like going down the path of like monitoring. If ONOS starts monitoring the networking related stuff, that's fine. But it starts monitoring other whole bunch of stuff, then where do we draw the line? Like, if there's another process somewhere, are we going to start monitoring that other process as well? I mean, where do we draw the line, right? Like at some point, I think it's just there are tools made for this. They've been used by sysadmins for years and years. Why should this change? They're very good. They're perfectly fine.
The only thing is I would probably advise that, especially in this case, rather than us pulling, we just have this stuff pushed to us, and that way we can be more passive.
Right.
And then it's up to somebody else to write essentially an adapter to push this information to ONOS. That way we actually are refraining even from taking on even more liability. Then if we actively have to pull it, we have to be familiar with what the interface is. I'd rather have the outside adapt to us.
No, it's a publish subscribe mechanism. You have a bus somewhere where messages are put on the bus and you can pick up messages on the bus. Same mechanism for everybody.
But could you?
We don't have. Well, okay.
You have to build support for that.
Yes. So if once we have support for it, I have no problem with it. But if that's the only thing that we would be building support for it, then I would be resilient. Right now, I would just say we have a REST API. Open up a REST API for somebody to feed us information. Thank you. Have a nice day. We're good to go. Once the bus becomes available, we'll accept it on a bus.
So this is interesting. This is the reverse service interface. So proposal 0 was like, grab this third-party library that contains all sorts of binary artifacts. That doesn't sound very good. It seems like something better than that would be, implement something in pure Java that is platform dependent, but handles a lot of platforms like any Linux kernel.
Sure.
And then option 3 is use a service interface where ONOS implements a client side of us and can fetch information. And then 4 maybe is the minimum amount of work for ONOS, which I think we all sort of agree might be a very good thing. And that's just implement an API like a REST API or Java API or whatever that allows whoever it is, data source X, to send us stuff.
Yeah, but
of course there is a potential denial of service and other sorts of things. But
this particular
what I'm saying
is around
yes.
Should we allow?
So specifically
should we allow
for this
Gen I or
problem,
not?
I think the last one.
Coming back, we're in the context that you opened up of, let's just consider this case.
I did.
That was you.
I think to make it very, I mean, the discussion is specific.
So I think
so we made it very
in the
specific.
context. So if you were to settle that last thing, so I like
In
Bob's
context.
summary of those 4 options at least. And so if you say for this particular thing, both for feature bloat, for platform liability, and other things like that, even though the libraries are there, make it really easily. There's too many negatives. For that, let's not get engaged with this, and instead just either pull for these metrics from out of process, or even better, have somebody send them to us.
Yeah, I think
I actually would lean towards the second version, which is have somebody just send them to us, open up a REST API, and be done with it. In this specific case, now if you all agree on that, we can then open the doors again on a wider discussion of generally what we should be doing with JNI.
So here, I think for JNI we should have like a bit of a standard where we say like, okay, you want to pull in this. So someone comes along and says, I have this feature. It needs JNI, right? And we should have some kind of like acceptance criteria of that JNI, right? So first, it should be like, is there any alternative? Right? Is there any like alternative where you don't need JNI?
And this is for the code that goes inside ONOS, right?
If
If you code that's outside, we don't care.
Well, of course, not ours.
Yeah.
Okay, I disagree. I believe code that's outside ONOS we do care for security reasons.
Well, but it's not ours. It's someone else is deploying it. It's
they can modify the platform in whichever way to make it
We can't really do
I mean,
that.
anybody can modify the platform. What I'm suggesting is that it might be beneficial for ONOS, from a security perspective, for ONOS for administrators of ONOS to be able to specify a policy that prohibits native code being loaded by apps.
Well, I mean, if you're
Or doesn't load apps that require native
if you're an operator, right? If you're an operator, you better know what's being loaded onto your ONOS, right? Like it's not
Even a Java application can present security problems.
I understand that, but what I'd like to suggest is that it is a valuable, and unfortunately nobody else, I guess, in the room cares about security, but I'd like to say that there is definitely a category of people who would like to ensure that system administrators cannot erroneously load code that due to configuration or other errors or version changes or whatever, that you won't inadvertently accept this code in your system.
So hold on. So the thing I was going to, the steps I was going to suggest, we're going to cover this in a way, if they're supported by kernel. So the first is like, is there an alternative? Is it
Yeah, the first is headed off at the pass if at all possible.
right? Is there an alternative? Is it something that doesn't require JNI?
And is it a feature that you absolutely have to have, or else the system will not work?
Right. It's basically it's like someone didn't do their homework properly, essentially.
But it's not just that. It's also saying, is the feature so devastatingly important that we cannot live without it?
Fair enough. That's also not. That
should
another
really,
gate-
I think, be the
gate-
criterion. You know, is the feature so devastatingly important that we cannot live without it?
Sure.
And
then assuming
is there absolutely no other way in the entire universe to do this?
So is this for actually
Which is a really high bar, right?
accepting any dependency that has a dependency on native libraries?
In the core.
Well, let's finish hearing Aliyah.
Oh yeah, but yeah, sorry. Just go on.
Thank you. So assuming now we've gone to the point where we realize that JNI is the only way, right? Now we have to come to a point where we agree on how this JNI is going to be delivered. Okay. So is it going to be delivered as an OSGI bundle, protected by the mechanisms of OSGI, provided Karat supports that? And if yes, then what are the criteria for this? Right? Do we have to be very specific in how we define what we need, how we need it, how we load it, we have to be careful with this piece of crap, right? Because it's like a time bomb, right? It'll blow up in our face and the whole system melts down, right? So we have to be very, very careful, handle it with care. And so those 3 steps would kind of provide us with at least protection, such that we don't need to have this thing loaded all the time. I think another criteria maybe that kind of transcends all of the rest is if your library is touching a local system and is required by your application, then something's out of whack, right? Because if you're importing it in an application layer, then your application is going straight to the system. There's something funky there, whereas you might want to wrap this in maybe a southbound bundle or something like that, just to protect you. If we get to that point and we have these mechanisms in place, then we have a bit of a kind of a described, detailed process to deliver these things, and we're kind of guarding ourselves against the thing blowing up in our face, I think.
Right. What about just simply just saying, no JNI? I mean, other than what KVM does on its own, right? And if you want to do anything natively, spawn separate process to basically offers you a level of isolation and protection from the crash. Of course, it will cost you potentially in terms of performance because now you have to do IPC or some sort of right.
Well, JNI already costs you something in terms of performance.
Sure.
Well, it gives you performance in some cases.
Advantages and
It depends
disadvantages.
upon whether there's more.
But it might simplify. So that still doesn't but at least that might address some of the resiliency and security aspects. But I mean, clearly it still does not address the aspects of dealing with now maintenance of the platform specific.
I feel like if we say spawn up another process, then we're kind of saying that this thing is outside of the scope of ONOS.
Well, that's kind of what I'm hoping.
Like a service.
In that case, sure.
It's just what I'm trying to
It's
the problem.
It's a service API saying if some apps we encourage apps that have, specific platform dependencies to use this to deploy a service on that platform and call the service API.
Maybe I misunderstood the point of the premise of the TST. I thought the idea was find a way to accept JNI, and here I'm realizing that, like, in some ways we don't have to at all.
That's my thing.
So
is
I
we allow it, right?
I don't care either way.
So
Frankly,
what
I don't
about
like JNI.
if your app basically has a dependency on a third-party library, which is JNI based. I mean, the app itself is not writing basically direct native access code.
Yeah, they're just writing, engaging Java APIs.
Yeah, I mean, there are some very popular sort of Java libraries which pull native dependencies.
And this, right? That's that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're saying, well, I don't commit the crime, I'm just an accessory to the crime.
Yes.
So I'm still
And
guilty,
it is
right?
possible that we are already doing that. Most of the persistence libraries that we use for local persistence, they already have some sort of. There are very few libraries that are purely Java based. Even if you take BDB and those kind of level DB, for example.
But okay, but I mean. How do we manage those today? The platform-specific parts?
We are using a purely Java-based.
Right.
Okay. But there are some very popular libraries which have native dependencies.
Yeah, and crack cocaine is very popular also. We don't want to start using it.
Well, so the thing is, the question, I guess the question.
I don't do the phone.
So the thing is, okay, again, in the name of focus for this team, and do we need to, I guess, are we obliged to solve those problems? Do we just simply leave it open and just saying, if you have a need to do this, if you want to, just figure it out. But for contribution to the core, what should be the stance? Contribution to the core and core built-in, also the built-in apps.
Yeah.
What should be the stance there? Right? I mean,
do
we just simply say just avoid it at all costs, kind of follow the outline given by Ali, sort of disqualification outline, and if absolutely necessary, sort of.
I think it's kind of like make it as hard as possible to get JNI or JNA based stuff into the system. Make it as hard as possible, so that people really think about whether they really want to do it.
Yeah, and so if people, presumably, we give people more freedom with their own apps. Their own apps can have whatever code they want. The question is, what if somebody writes application X that has JNI/JNA dependencies because it uses hundreds of these third-party libraries that all use them, or it just decides it wants to do it itself? The question is, do we take a stance on that? Does the system protect you from loading these things inadvertently? Can you set a policy as to whether they're permitted or not? Or is it just we give you enough rope, and if you decide to hang yourself, that's it?
I have one example where someone might want to have a good reason to put JNI. I think this hasn't been resolved yet. Like all loggers right now on Unix, if you want to log the syslog, you have to open a UDP port on your syslog server. A lot of people won't do that. They just will refuse to open.
How about loopback?
No, you have. I mean, it has to be open on your that UDP port has to be open.
Right. How about on the loopback interface?
I mean, sure, but it's still open on. It's a TCP thing, so like you come on any interface.
No. Not if it's, well, depending on how you do it, I suppose. But usually, if something's only listening when you open up something, you can only listen on a particular interface. So if you only listen on the loopback interface, then some other random interface, ETH0, it will not propagate into it because you're only listening on the loopback.
No, I don't know. I mean, like, so I had this problem. The only reason why I'm saying this, I had this problem with Lowizer, where people in Genie refused to open their UDP port, and I was like, well, you can secure it in so many ways. And they're like, no, we don't want to. We want you to write straight to syslog via the system API. So. I was like, well, I have no choice.
There are lots of stupid things that Genie does. We don't have to adopt them.
No, I understand, but I mean, like the fact that it's an example, right? So someone might.
Yeah. I think we should tell them no, that we're not going to do that. Flowvisor, maybe whatever, but.
Well, I don't. I mean, it's not like Genie's barely existing.
Yeah, I mean, but whoever, stupid person X, if they want to do stupid thing Y, like we should say, well, we don't want to do that because we don't think it's a good idea and we don't want to compromise our platform in that way. If you want to write an application to do it, well, here's enough rope, you can go and hang yourself. What we'd recommend is that you make a service interface. If you want to have it encrypted, if you want to have, whatever, you can do that and just use that service interface. That's probably our recommended solution.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
I can't.
I think for the core, whenever someone adds a third-party dependency, I think those should at least be reviewed, and for basically inadvertent introduction of that platform like specificness. But the apps, we don't really care. They can do whatever they want as long as.
Yeah.
But I still would suggest that security matters, and that I think administrators should be able to set policy that where there's an example is that you might have an application that has third-party library Y, and when you update it, it pulls in a new version of that library that now has this JNA dependency. You might want to no longer load that because you don't trust it, for example. Might be I would suggest that security policy matters.
So I think that's something we may get to in due course of time after we've taken steps to secure some of the intermediate steps. Like, for example, when we have individual authorization for people to install new apps. Right now, it's a one-level access. You can either access ONOS and do everything, or you can't access it and pretty much do nothing, right? So we need to be able to build in some authorization model for operating inside the ONOS console or the UI. And once we have that, then we can start introducing these graduated permissions. But we don't have those right now. So I think in due course of time we may get there. So in the meantime, I would probably suggest we just leave it, just leave it open. Whatever people want to do for their own apps, that's fine. For contributing, like Madan suggested, if they want to contribute to the core, should make sure that it gets reviewed and appropriately scrutinized to make sure that there is no other way to accomplish this before we take on the liability of maintaining platform specifics.
Yeah, so one thing we didn't do for this meeting is have a document where you could type in notes. And so I don't know, I sort of wanted to type in, to take down those criteria.
Sorry, yes. I didn't. Do you want me to set one up, or do you want to set one up and we link to it? There's under ONOS Google Drive thing here. Let's do this.
I mean, you can link to your presentation, or you can create another one. I don't know, or whatever.
Oh, here, yeah. I'll. Well, I think probably we're nearing the end, right? Anyway, so I'll try to remember to do it next time, to set up a document for the notes, so that you can do this.
Yeah, I just don't want this to be lost, because I wrote down the three things, like, it's functionally so important that ONOS cannot live without it. Is there absolutely no other way in the universe to do that? For example, can you not do it in another processor with a service interface?
Yeah.
Can it absolutely not be done in pure Java? And then three, Ali's comment, are you absolutely sure that this is not an error in design / abstraction / layering / logic?
Here it's shared with you, and you can maybe talk
cool.
Awesome. If you wouldn't mind, since you have them, and then I'll try to make sure that I'll link it next time. So I think, is that all right, Jen? Then probably what we will do in this particular case, we probably abandon that particular chicken, or at least or scope it down to just maybe provide a REST API through which we can accept instrumentation and just leave it at that. And then maybe we can provide a small command that, like a shell command that can, on Linux systems, can actually use the proc, produce a XML, produce a JSON, and upload it, so that you can basically just hit that button to obtain the load.
So the REST API you're talking about, is that for fetching the stats, or is that for
feeding,
providing
providing metrics about the system load? That's what I was talking about. For uploading them.
Okay.
So that so the whole idea is sort of, so we don't get in the business of monitoring and all that stuff, right? We simply provide this. This would be we provide an interface through which this information can be fed to us.
Okay.
Whatever its origins are, we don't care. As long as it comes in this JSON, we're good. And then as a sort of a testing solution, for Linux boxes, we can probably provide a small shell command, whether it's written in Python or Bash, doesn't really matter, to obtain this information locally from the proc files.
Okay.
And then compose the JSON and just ship it.
Yeah.
And it should be probably half page of code to be able to do this, right?
Okay.
And now we will, once we receive that information, then we can essentially react to it.
Okay. So I was hoping that most of these monitoring systems, they actually let you, they provide an interface for feeding information into it, like CPU stats and everything.
Oh, feeding information into it. Okay.
Right. And you can also set thresholds.
Okay.
And when you reach those thresholds, basically raise an alarm.
Okay.
And if ONOS can subscribe to those alarms,
Mm-hmm.
right, and those alarms can be delivered, either a message or maybe a call to a REST API, then you essentially get less traffic, and only get those alarms when something happens.
Sure. So okay.
So instead of you getting a steady stream of stats and then essentially trying to make decisions based on that,
Okay.
That is how I understood that.
Yeah. So the reason I suggested that was because I was under the assumption that currently we triggered the load balancing based on monitoring the system load.
Right.
And so I was assuming we already had a mechanism to sort of keep some read history of time to be able to monitor this within ONOS. I'm completely fine with simply accepting an external trigger that says, you went past the threshold, do something.
Yeah. I mean, the only, I think we can probably do it in 2 stages. Do what you plan to do right now. The benefit I see with sort of having this external entity make these decisions as to when things get breached and so on is that it is in a position to aggregate metrics across multiple instances.
Sure.
So for example, if CPU is high, it might say that CPU is high everywhere. So don't really make any decisions right now because it doesn't really help the system.
Sure.
So things
It
like
might
that.
actually make it worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. So I guess maybe in order to minimize the impact on Jen's project, because right now it's based on monitoring, right? We monitor the performance, and the turning check-in that you have in is not about monitoring; it's about supplying this information.
Yes.
Right. So I was just simply suggesting an alternate form of supplying this information to
So
the monitoring.
some other.
So basically, so provide an API through which we can accept this information. That information can be acted on using the existing means that we have in place or that are planned. And I think we can then consider Madan's solution as probably as the next evolution.
So in that case, we need to install something like agents to each of the ONOS VM so that we can collect some of the system information to feed to the ONOS.
So the suggestion here is that to leave that agent installation completely to deployments. We wouldn't, basically that's up to the deployment. So whether they use some, it's up to them which monitoring systems they use. We provide them a mechanism to feed us this information so that we can react to it. That way we don't get into this, we're not providing a necessarily overall solution.
I see.
And the idea here is that we don't have necessarily the right manpower to be able to deal with the different deployments. So the idea is to stay focused. So we need to be able to make sure we provide smart balancing, load balancing. So let's provide that, but let's not get engaged with these different agents for monitoring. And so let's expose a REST API through which we can accept this information. And as for testing purposes and maybe just as a demonstration purposes, we can write a small shell tool, Python, Bash, whatever, to acquire this information from the system and feed it to the REST API. And it would be a push button thing. And if somebody wants to put it in a cron, great, and you do that. But ONOS itself is kind of free from that. It just assumes that it's going to get notified when something goes astray. because it's a little bit out of the primary mission of the of ONOS as a network control platform, right? And it allows other systems which are more specialized for system and resource monitoring to help us.
Okay. So because I just need to devise a set of REST API
Yeah.
to collect those information. And
Yes,
to
or to accept it.
I see.
To accept it, really, not collect it, to accept it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it should be fairly, I mean, it's a fairly straightforward API. It should be fairly straightforward API. We probably already have a REST API to expose that information, right?
Right.
So this would be just simply adding ability to post this information.
Yes.
So it should be fairly small, hopefully small tweak to those existing REST APIs. And it will free us from responsibility to have to manage the platform system.
Okay.
Because while that might save some development time, it will probably cost us more in release engineering time. Does it sound reasonable? Okay. All right. So if there is nothing else to add, I think we can probably call it good for today. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day. Bye-bye, Simon.
Yes, I just grab one of the open source like